Chapter 4. The Race. Both Magica and Wandina flapped their wings furiously, and were soon over 100 meters up in the air. Magica found the ascent surprisingly tiring. It was like something was pulling her down. She had no idea that this was purely a result of her increased weight. By the time both sugar fairies reached the tip of Glen Mountain, they were 500 meters into the air and had covered over 60 kilometers. They both swooped down onto the neatly prepared pile of Glen crystals at exactly the same time. Wandina's eyes burned with fire as she shoulder-charged Magica out of the way and grabbed one of the bright yellow crystals. She then maliciously kicked the remaining crystals down the sides of the mountain. She laughed hysterically as she heard several loud splashes resonate from below. The remaining crystals were now sitting in various locations along the sandy beds of the fairly shallow, slow-moving, translucent blue stream that hugs its arms around the base of Glen Mountain and gently meandered its way through the centre of town.
"Happy fishing!"
laughed Wandina sarcastically.
"And good luck trying to fly with wet wings!"
As Wandina flew off triumphantly, Magica started to cry. She felt totally helpless. If she returned to the finish line without a Glen crystal, she would be disqualified. If she dived into the stream to retrieve one, her wings would become soaked, and this would make flying for the rest of the race almost impossible. The crystals gleamed up at her through the water tantalizingly. Her tears suddenly turned to joy as she felt hot, steamy air on the back of her head and heard the familiar, dry, stuttering voice of Frother. His appearance at this particular time, on this particular day, could not have been more perfect. Magica dived into the stream below, grabbed one of the Glen crystals, and then hurriedly jumped back out. She was now soaking wet and freezing cold. She waved her wings furiously to get rid of the excess dripping water. Frother then blow-dried her efficiently and effectively from head to toe. His enormous steaming nostrils were perfectly designed for this job. Within a matter of seconds, her wings were perfectly dry and ready for flight. She bade him farewell and set off after Wandina. "Don't give up," he smiled warmly. You can still win!" With renewed enthusiasm and vigour, she headed for the one and only tree by the River Flicker. It was easy to find, because it was literally the one and only tree that grew alongside the River Flicker. No other trees could survive. Other trees' root systems found the water of the River Flicker far too sweet. I'm told that the water tastes exactly like red cordial and contains twice as much sugar. As Magica reached the tree, she saw Wandina flying off. She was quite surprised to see Wandina. She thought her rival would be much further ahead of her by now. So what had slowed her down? As she looked closely at a clump of the distinctive triangular-shaped leaves directly above her, part of the answer became immediately clear. Wandina had wasted precious time carving nasty words into the flesh of 4 consecutive leaves, using her beautifully manicured nails as engraving tools. Magica, the loser witch. Wandina had also taken time out to gorge on the sugar from a few of its delicious bell-shaped fruits. The red pips and fleshy pulp lay on the ground below. She obviously thought that Magica had given up and that time was no longer of the essence. She obviously did not know Magica's true character. Anyone who knew Magica well would be acutely aware that she would never give up, no matter what obstacles she faced. Magica snapped off a leaf with real intent and then flew off furiously in pursuit of Wandina. She headed towards the forever glittering cloud at the Valley of Forgiveness. She was finding flying today very difficult. Despite the weather conditions being perfect, she felt as if something was pulling her towards the ground. She felt heavy. The muscles that connected her wings to her shoulder blades were starting to burn. A little bit of pain was not going to slow her down, though. She was determined to win. She gritted her teeth and increased the work rate of her wings. Meanwhile, Wandina had caught a glimpse of Magica only 500 meters away and was starting to panic. Why had Magica not given up? How could she fly so well with wet wings? As Wandina reached the base of the glittering cloud, she looked back with trepidation and saw that Magica had closed the gap even further. The cloud produced regular flashes of light, which made everything around it look quite surreal, almost as if things were happening in a jerky, slow motion. Wandina quickly waved her vial through the cloud and filled it with strobe glitter. She hurriedly capped the lid and flew off with haste. However, as she reached the end of the cloud, a really nasty idea entered her head. She suddenly ascended above the glittering cloud and doubled back. She was now on top of it, directly above Magica, who was hovering at its base. At the very moment that Magica took out her vial, Wandina banged down furiously with both of her hands on top of the cloud. An avalanche of strobe glitter rained down on Magica. Its cumulative weight sent Magica plummeting downwards more than 50 meters. To the onlookers below, it appeared as if a shooting star was falling from the sky. Wandina laughed hysterically. Magica shook her body, wriggled her head and flapped her wings furiously in an attempt to rid herself of the glitter. She eventually won the battle. However, in doing so, she had exhausted a lot of energy and wasted a lot of time. Oh well, at least the vial of strobe glitter was full. All that remained now was the race back to the finish line. Whilst she had no doubt lost the race at this point, barring a miracle, she still wanted to finish. It was a matter of pride. Besides, she would also get to see Frother once again as she passed by Glen Mountain on her way back. By this point in time, the muscles in her shoulder blades were twitching uncontrollably and the pain was intense. As Magica approached Glen Mountain, her face burst into a huge smile. Suspended helplessly in one of Harry's massive, difficult-to-see spiderwebs was Wandina. She was screaming uncontrollably. As she saw Magica approach, she started begging Magica to help set her free. She had not seen the almost invisible web and had flown right into it. She promised to let Magica win the race. She just wanted to be free to return to her daddy and her life of plenty. She didn't want to be on tonight's dinner menu. Despite Wandina's nastiness, Magica took pity on her and helped to free her. The very moment Wandina was freed, she renegade on her promise and sprinted for the finish line. In her haste, she neglected to retrieve her pouch, which was still clinging to the sticky web. Without her pouch, she would be automatically disqualified. Magica realised that Wandina had rushed off without her pouch, but no longer felt any sympathy. "Serves a nasty piece of work right," she thought gleefully. Magica looked down at Frother and Harry, who had emerged triumphantly from their cover in the dense shrub below. Harry was perched comfortably on Frother's head. "Thank you," she yelled, and blew them both a kiss as she flew off in hot pursuit of Wandina. You're welcome," smiled Frother, and blew a kiss back. Hot steam filled the air in front of him and Harry.
"Kick her snobby ass, gothic princess!"
shouted Harry, and waved all 20 of his limbs in the air encouragingly.
"Hurry! Hurry! Hurry!"
As Wandina entered the arena, she could hear the crowd screaming. She looked back and Magica was at least 300 meters behind. The race was hers. She even had time to do a few celebratory hoops and loops. Her daddy was shouting uncontrollably. She saw the wishing well and reached for the golden coin in her pouch.
"My pouch!"
she cried. "It's still in the web," smiled Magica as she flew past Wandina and took out her own golden coin. Wandina swooped on Magica and started to wrestle with her in midair. The crowd was very unimpressed with Wandina's unfairy-like behaviour. They started chanting, "Magica! Magica! Magica!" Magica managed to break away from Wandina momentarily. This was just the opportunity that young Zula had been anxiously waiting for. He waved his wand, said a quick series of chants, and Wandina was suddenly falling to the muddied ground below like a heavy stone. He had used the feathers to lead spell and the land to mud spell. Her entry into the mud pool below took the form of a perfect belly flop. Even Magica, who was now totally exhausted, managed a wry smile. She dropped her golden coin into the wishing well and it reacted with a dazzling display of fireworks. The race was over and she had won. She was the fastest sugar fairy in Flush Fleas for this year. Exhausted and overcome with emotion, she collapsed into the arms of Zula. and happily accepted his warm embrace. The dishevelled Wandina, weighed down in gluggy orange mud, waddled ungracefully towards her daddy. When she arrived, Weasel wanted nothing to do with her. That night, Magica replayed the race again and again in her mind whilst gorging on a bowl of sugar fruits. Despite being delighted to have won, she wondered why she felt so heavy in the air during the race. Why? 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 She got up and looked at her wings in the mirror again. Her wings looked perfect. So what could it be? After taking a relaxing bath in the oil of a bambam tree, she dried herself off and put on a brand new pair of drudger silk pyjamas that her parents had purchased for her as a congratulatory gift. Great, she thought as she struggled to fit in them. Mum's obviously purchased the wrong size. She checked the size tag, and to her surprise, it was in fact the correct size. The leotard had been tight on her earlier today, and now the pyjamas. She tried putting on an old pair of pyjamas and split the pants down the seam in the process. Panic set in as item after item failed to fit her properly. She removed all her clothing and scrutinized her body in the mirror. For the first time, she noticed the blatantly obvious. She was stacking on weight. "How can this be?" she screamed in frustration. "Sugar fairies of my age do not put on weight." Her parents were awoken by her scream and immediately entered her bedroom. They did not have to ask what the problem was. They could see for themselves. They were certain that their daughter had contracted the dreaded sugar metabolism virus. It had been more than 300 years since the last recorded case. This virus affects fairies' ability to efficiently break down the sugars they eat. Instead of converting the sugars to pure energy, most of it now converts to fat. Little did any of them know that it was not a virus that was causing Magica's affliction, but rather an evil spell. The spell would soon affect every single sugar fairy in Flush Fleas. If word of Magica's condition started to circulate, it would create mass panic within the Flush Fleas community. Magica would definitely be forced to leave Flush Fleas immediately. This assumed virus, which only attacks sugar fairies, was known to be highly contagious. What value would there be in being a fairy if you were too heavy to fly? Your wings would become completely ornamental and of little more use than one of those large handheld fans. If no longer useful, they would gradually disappear as the laws of evolution took hold. The added weight would even make hopping and skipping challenging. After a restless night of soul-searching, Magica arrived at a very tough but essential decision. She would leave Flush Fleas until such time as her condition improved. She knew that there was a good chance that her condition may never improve. That would mean never again returning to the place that she loved, never seeing the family and friends that she loved, never seeing Flopsy again. Having made this heartbreaking decision, she left in haste. She did not wake her parents or siblings because she knew that they would have tried to talk her into staying. She quickly composed a farewell glitter message for them, and then, with great trepidation and sadness in her heart, she set off for the land of the lonely.